So today our topic is to wonder why. And I don't know about you, but if you're around children, often you hear that word. Well, why? And well, this is the way it is, but why? And I think we often start at that stage in our lives. Why is that? Why does it have to be that way? How does that work? And at some point, we slow that down a little bit. And I think being Unitarians, maybe we don't slow it down as much as other people do. There's often the joke about the big question mark in our as a part of our symbol, as much as having coffee pots and coffee as our worship focus. But our questions are important. They are a part of who we are. And I don't know about you all, but growing up, I watched my share of Star Trek and watched my share of science fiction shows. And I always had to wonder, when I went outside and located the Big Dipper, when I went outside and looked up at a bright harvest moon, is there someone on the other side of the planet looking at those same stars? Is there someone in a different planet than ours looking at stars in the same universe? And, are we alone in this big, vast space? And we think about, how does that change our perspective when we go beyond our own experience? We are finite beings who live for a finite period of time. Yet we live in a universe that is vast and infinite, it seems, though I'm sure many scientists could give me the exact parameters of time and how it unfolds and Big Bang. But to me, it is unfathomable that we would know the answers to as much as we already do. The James Webb Telescope has inspired a whole new generation of people who are asking why and how and when can we go to those stars, and how does this affect who we are as humanity or our life on our planet. And I know my hope for this planet is that we don't, in many science fiction stories, we hear about the planet being trashed and then we move on to another planet and trash that planet. My hope is that we will treat this earth home for the precious thing that it is, that we will treat our lives as the precious thing that it is. This time of year, we hear about the holiday story of Jesus, a child born in a manger. And we think about the mystery of that story, and many of us have deconstructed that story. But when we think about the preciousness of a baby born in unlikely circumstances, and a place when parents are trying to find a home or a place to have a safe birth, we can look to our borders. We can look to those across the street from us in our own town, those who are sleeping in our alleyways. Life is precious. And how we treat one another and how we treat ourselves is something to ask, to wonder why. I often wonder why I will have the best intentions to eat well, to exercise, and yet I am so drawn to that silly piece of pizza that has gluten. I really want that cheese pizza, but I know that I really should have gluten-free and dairy-free, but man, doesn't that look good? And then the next day I'm cursing myself like, why did I do that? I wonder why. And then I think to myself, I'm going to treat myself better. And sometimes I do. And when we think about how we treat our bodies, food is medicine. I've been seeing a lot of folks who are struggling with how to eat well, how to treat ourselves well. And it's a question to wonder why. And when we think about wonder, I know Tim had an amazing service last Sunday talking about wonder. We think about not only questions, but the experience of awe and wonder. And I remember as a little girl, I loved the smell of the pine tree once we finally got it up. And lying underneath the tree and just smelling the pine and looking up at those lights and just imagining different things, were they stars? Were there fairies in those lights? I would make up stories and just sit there and just have these moments of imagination. And that childlike wonder, that power of the questions and allowing our mind to not just be scrolling on social media or not just be watching doomsday news, but to imagine, to question, to wonder is wonderful. And it can change the experience of how we experience each day to allow ourselves that sense of awe and beauty. One of the things that I talked about in a small group that I meet with monthly is the power of an ordinary moment. What if you gave yourself the chance to have an awe walk, an AWE, where you say, aw, no, I'm kidding. It's the chance to experience things. And what if you asked yourself, what if I had never seen this before? I remember the first time I saw snow in woods, and since I grew up in South Carolina, it was a lot rarer than you all here. I was 10 years old the first time I saw snow. And the pine woods behind my house probably were shrieking, and what is this stuff? But it was so exciting. I took my little 35 millimeter camera, because we didn't have digital cameras when I was little, and I went into the woods, and I was amazed. I had footprints behind me. It was like Scooby-Doo. And there were all of this white stuff on the trees, and it looked like a postcard. It looked like something from A Christmas Carol. And I just remember thinking, this is the most magical thing in the world. This must be what Snow White felt like, or like a fairy tale. And I walked through the quiet of the woods. I was really lucky. My backyard was right next to these pine woods, and you could walk down to a river. And as I walked and got further and further in, the sound was so different. I was used to the sound of, pine woods, but the sound of walking in snow was unique, and the dripping of the snow, and just the trees covered all around me. And it was just the best experience ever. And then learning how to sled was not a good experience, but because we didn't have sleds, I used a toy box, and we had a hill. And I just remember thinking, this is going to be the best thing ever, but not so much. But I think, as we get older, we're willing to ask questions like, why am I not eating good food, and why do I feel bad the next day? Or we might ask questions about the universe, and is there life? But allowing ourselves that childlike question, do I deserve this time to experience pure joy? Yes, you do. And when we make spaces for that in our life and just put aside the to-do list, put aside the worrisome emails, and let ourselves be in that moment and ask, what if I had never seen this before? What if I had never done that? What if I would never see it again? And that's where I really value relationships. And, as we get older, we begin to lose people. And I know even when I was young, I remember my granddad said, hey, Julie, do you want to he spent a week with us before he died. And he had asked me to do things. And I was like, no, I'm too busy playing with my friend, or I'm too busy doing this, because he was granddad. And I knew he would be there, but he wasn't there the next week. And I remember spending a lot of time in regret. And so those moments, what if I had never seen this before? Maybe I would have heard a story, or maybe we would have shared a moment. And you don't want to live in shame and regret, but my point is that at this point in my life, if I get a chance to go sit down and talk to somebody, I love it because that's my job. But as a person, to hear a story or sing a song, or like yesterday we got a chance to see Ruth Waller over at Oakwood Hills, and that was wonderful. I hadn't seen her in a while, and sang carols with her. And like what Laurel said, to be a part of a musical experience where you share gifts and feel that inspiration is powerful. So I wanted to share a story with you about a woman, and I don't know about you, but she's called a book fairy, which sounds like the best job in the world. But her name is Barbara, and she lives in Milwaukee. She said, "My parents are immigrants from Mexico. My mom grew up here, and my father came when he was 17. I became a teen mom when I was 15 years old, and again at 19. My parents helped me so much with my first daughter. Looking back, I think about how my book collection started. My mom used to work at a school and brought home books to my daughters. When the pandemic hit, we started working from home. I went outside with the girls, and we would write positive messages in chalk on the sidewalk. On these walks, we noticed little free libraries. There were about 4 of them within a 2-block radius of my house, and they were always empty. I used to drive past them and not really pay attention to the little libraries, but as we spent more time walking outside, it was hard not to see them. Schools were closed, libraries were closed to in-person. So I wanted to contribute to these libraries and make sure the kids in my neighborhood had access to books. I went home and started cleaning out my bookshelves and my girls' bookshelves, and together we dropped off books. My girls used their little red wagon to carry the books. I put a few in each library to spread them out. At the end of the day, all the books were gone. I had more books, so I filled up the libraries again. And with the free little libraries, the idea is that you take a book or you leave a book. And I feel like that doesn't always happen in the hood. She lives in Milwaukee. Because people may not have books to give away. People love free things. Free things are just so amazing. I didn't get mad that the books were gone. I just thought, oh, okay, let's just fill them up again. So my girls and I did that again, and the next day, the books were all gone. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not giving any more books away. I just can't part with them. So I turned to Facebook. I updated my Facebook status and said, hey, are you getting rid of any books? Leave them on your porch, and I'll come and pick them up. And so she started filling up the little libraries near her house, and she got messages. She would take pictures. And then she heard of a grant that was called Love Your Block, and they were giving out $500 for projects that were created in response to the pandemic. And she said, I hit them with statistics like studies show that reading decreases depression and stress, and this is what people need during the pandemic. And she received 2 rounds of funding. And she went on to do all of this, and she became known as the book fairy. She made sure to order books that were reflective of African American and those of Asian descent, and made sure that people saw books that represented the neighborhoods that they were in. And it was completely supported by people from her Facebook page and by community grants. And that takes wonder and imagination. When the pandemic hit, our normal schedules, our drive to work, what we always did, hit a big stop. And we were all doing something that we weren't used to doing. And I think that's why a lot of us started baking bread. People started writing messages on sidewalks for hope. But we also began to use our imaginations. How could we be together when we were so far apart? How could we keep our relationships going? And the power of wonder, of asking questions, helped start whole new careers for people. It helped start new relationships. I know I reconnected with friends from Atlanta. I got really close with a writers group that I would not have started if I had been in person. So what are the things that happen when we wonder why. So when I look up at Carol Johnson and everyone else who gave to this window, this is a picture of the universe, a picture of the stories of creation. And we started from the very beginning of humanity to ask why. Why are we here? What are we doing with our lives? You know, we would sit around fires and tell stories and before we had answers, and that's where a lot of religion came from. People needed hope. People needed to understand why there were bad storms. Why was the eclipse happening? People were afraid. And as we found answers to science, you know, sometimes people put this dichotomy between science and belief and faith. But I don't know about you, but most scientists are pretty curious and will admit to mystery, and that there is so much awe and beauty in thinking about the minutia of our universe. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we get lost in finding only the answers and forget to ask the questions. And get lost if we think that we know everything about our experience or everything about our beliefs, instead of wondering, what about that? You know, what about that idea that, you know, is there a God? For some people, it's a definite yes. For some people, it's a definite no. And sometimes there's that place in between. You know, what is God? What is the sacred? What is life? And those big questions, sometimes we find answers that we didn't even know that we were looking for. And often it happens under great periods of stress. But if we open ourselves to moments of mindfulness or beauty or question, sometimes we find answers in those little moments, in those relationships, or taking a risk. So I want to close with this idea, thinking about when you were little, what did you wonder about? What were you curious about? What stories inspired you? I used to think about Narnia, and if you don't know the story of Narnia, there's a wardrobe that you open up, and it goes to a whole different world. And when I opened up a book, I would go to a whole different world, and I would imagine, could I be strong like Nancy Drew and solve that mystery? Could I be brave like Laura Ingalls Wilder? Could I go into the great winter that was Narnia? Is that true? And when we think about with our imagination, and when we think about how we can expand our experience and the experience of others, it's powerful, and it changes how we walk through the world. And there's that phrase of walking in a sacred manner, or being in a sacred manner. And that really is a mind frame of wonder. And so in this season where we're looking for light, it's awfully gray outside. I know some struggle with seasonal depression and looking for that light to return. The light is around us. You know, there's the Big Dipper. There's if we can see it, there's the harvest moon, and there's the joy of lying under the tree. So when you go downstairs, hopefully you will today, and see the joy of presents and coffee and conversation, or seeing someone or meeting someone for the first time, I invite you to enter into that experience and experience the power of wonder. Thank you.